Hello and welcome. I'm Naomi Tite, CEO of Tite Konsult Inc., an agency working on innovation and connection of people, businesses, and communities. Our journey today brings us to Albany, where an immigrant entrepreneur is using language to break down barriers, create better inclusion for other migrants, and empower all communities. We had the honor of celebrating Akula interpreting 5th anniversary and interviewing two wonderful guests. Diane Mbombo, CEO and founder of Akula Interpreting and Translation LLC, and Michael Edmonson, the tech architect behind their remarkable growth. They walk us through how a simple conversation evolved into a premier language company handling more than 60,000 calls per year, from a COVID-19 emergency response to a global lifeline, from serving a handful of languages to over 100, from local impact to international reach. This is a story of vision, technology, and fundamental belief that everyone deserves to be heard in their own language. So let's dive into this beautiful story right away.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Naomi.
Alors, commençons par le début.
So I was just explaining that my background is really definitely tailored and has been shaped by people who are in business for generations. I've been getting inspired by my mom, who is definitely somebody who has such an amazing business mind. I've seen her, she was definitely raising us, but always have an activity on the side. And she learned it from her mom, my grandmother, who was also married to a very famous business owner called Congolo Dominique 421, who had hotels, bars, and a lot of business activities. So, en grandissant, c'était jamais la question de est-ce que tu vas être dans le business ou pas, mais c'est quand est-ce que tu vas commencer le business. On savait tous qu'on avait ça dans le sang. Donc du coup, quand je suis venue aux États-Unis, comme on va dire, j'ai immigré aux États-Unis, en fait, je me suis aussi, j'ai pris le temps d'observer. So I came in the US, I took time for me to observe, what was available, what was overlooked, and it was just a matter which type of activity I will be studying. But for sure, I knew that, yes, I'm going to have like a 9-to-5 work or job, but on the side, I will also have another source of income.
Okay, great. So going back to your experience in New York, because when we go through your website, we can see that you really mention about your experience as an immigrant in New York, going through the American system, and not knowing how to file out papers or how to comply with those requirements in the United States as a newcomer. Est-ce qu'on pourrait dire que c'est quelque chose qui a inspiré la mission d'Akula? So if you're looking at your statement or the mission of Akula, is it coming from your personal experience as a migrant in the United States that have boost or it has some impact into bringing out that mission or wanted to work into the community?
Yes, definitely. I came in US myself, coming from Democratic Republic of the Congo. As a newcomer, you face yourself with that linguistic barrier in front of you. So in Congo, the dominant language is French, and we have also other national language like Lingala, Chiluba, Swahili, and Kikongo. So I leave the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where I was speaking French and other languages that I just mentioned on a daily basis. I was already speaking English because I used to work for organization where English was also, I would say, the more dominant language. But it's definitely not the same. So you have to get used to the music. I used to work for British companies, and I came here. There is an American accent, so you have to get more comfortable with the English from America, that accent, how it sounds. And eventually, I had to learn all the ropes and to navigate the US system. And that's when I understood that language was definitely a key component for anyone who wants to be successful in US. So every time I was exchanging or talking about my path about my journey here in the US, and I was sharing that I speak 5 languages, like English, Swahili, Lingala, Chiluba, and French. People were like, wow, that's amazing. And I told myself, well, coming from a country where there is almost 300 language and plus, it was never seen as, I will say, a wow. It's more common, right?
Yeah.
Almost everybody we know back home speak at least 3 languages. And I felt like, okay, Diane, this is maybe what I call that angel whispers. So I have to listen to what people are saying. I think that there's definitely a need here. So I will stop there and see whether you have any other question for me from her.
Yes. And Akula is such a unique name. So what is the meaning of Akula? Derrière l'histoire de Akula Interpreting and Translation LLC, but why Akula?
Thank you very much. So why Akula? Because Akula talks to me. Akula means literally talk or speak in Chiluba. So Chiluba is my mother tongue. I am from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I have been naturalized American. I'm very proud of it. But my country of origin, my ancestors' country, is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I am from Kasai.
So let's move to the community impact, l'impact communautaire. Là, Akula a commencé de zéro. On va dire ça comme ça. Comment est-ce que Akula a commencé? Je parle de construire Akula. Like building up Akula, moving around, 0 call to now thousands of calls every day. And comment est-ce que vous avez pu évaluer la demande et aussi le besoin de la communauté?
Alors, merci beaucoup pour la question. So I'm coming from a family where business has been definitely instilled in us since we were born, like at a very, very young age. So coming in US, of course, you need to survive, you need to support your family. I needed to find a job, what we call 9-to-5 job. But I knew that eventually I have to figure out what type of business I want to do. So during the COVID-19 crisis, that was literally when we had all that time in hand, right? We had a chance to rethink, to reinvent ourselves. So during one of our walk with my husband, who used to be my boyfriend at the time, so we were just walking after having dinner, and he mentioned to me, say, honey, you've been telling me for years that your great-grandfather had horses. He was literally, I would say, at the time, the Rockefeller of Kasai, and your grandfather had chains of hotels, is known by that, Congo 421. He had bars, he was selling corns and maize. He had so many, I would say, assets. And you mentioned also that your grandmother taught you how to do business. So you've been telling me that you know for sure that you will be starting a business. How about now? You know, we have all that time in hand. So how do you feel about being a CEO? I was like, oh, well, that sounds very good in my ears, but how can I start a business? When I was back home, I will, doing business with informally, the informal sector is more the one who is really, I would say, driving the economy in Congo. But here in US, I know there's a lot of paperwork that I've mentioned, and I'm not too sure how to do it. Are you willing to help me? Say, well, I'm not too sure if I know everything, but I know that we can hire definitely an agency that can help us to tick all those boxes. So that's what we did. We did Google search. We find a firm that was certified to help anyone is interested to start a business to produce the paperwork and literally guide you. So around August the 24th, 2020, my husband handed me over a file. He say, congratulations, CEO, this is your company.
Can you talk us through a little bit about the challenge first and the obstacle and anything that might have turned this dream down? Like saying that, you know what, it's okay. I'm tired, it's not moving at all, or it's too demanding, and I just want to close that door.
Yeah, sure. As you can tell, any success stories hide many, I would say, up and down challenges on the road, obstacles. I mean, I just want to rewind a little bit. So I mentioned that, 2029, 2022 is where we had all that time. But I started working in an office around 2017 to 18 as a full-time, I would say, interpreter. So I was working for a company that was providing language service. So I've been also exposed to that industry as an employee. So during that time, I would say the challenge was to find clients, to explain and to make sure that people understand that language service, it's a right, it's a civil right. So now I want to also explain the challenge as a business owner.
Exactly.
I mean, as a business owner, despite all the enthusiasm, and that's, I would say, I call it literally, this is my mission. I feel like every time I wake up, every morning when I wake up, what drives me and give me that fuel is to know that I will help a grandmother to understand the results that she's getting from a doctor because she has no idea why they're putting those equipment in her body, and that grandmother doesn't speak English, or a mom who just came to this country and want to be part of her child education and to contribute to it, but the language is a barrier. So to be able to sustain that mission, to sustain that energy as a human being can be exhausting.
Yeah.
I am a mom, I am a wife, so being a business owner, you're going to be having some late nights. You have to literally be able to do all the research to, as I mentioned, find clients, find interpreters who are trained, make sure that you find who are trained, and to provide a service that is actually something that you know that client will come back to you. Alors, j'expliquais que ou prendre cet appel d'un client pour le satisfaire. Donc, ça vient avec le fait de juste la fatigue comme un être humain et de penser est-ce que ça vaut vraiment la peine de continuer. Mais il y a toujours, on va dire, cette flamme en nous quand vous le faites vraiment par conviction et parce que vous sentez cet appel qui continue à vous donner justement la force de continuer.
Pour le moment, combien de langues est-ce que Akula couvre en ce moment?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So we have over 200 languages. And I just want to mention that we start with a handful of language. It was just literally me as a business. So at the time when COVID hit us all, so one of the challenge that you were asking me about, I just lost my source of income. So for 4 months, I had no income at all because at the time, hospitals and courts were, I would say, a little bit pausing and observing that remote type of job using WebEx, Zoom. They were like just observing. So nothing really was happening. So if I don't get any calls or we could not go in person. So I mean, I don't get any source of income. So that was scary. So, je mentionnais que l'un des impacts et des défis que nous avons eu au début, c'est de justement savoir comment est-ce qu'on allait naviguer cette nouvelle réalité du monde du travail à distance, où les hôpitaux et les cours et tribunaux étaient un peu, on va dire, ils ont posé un moment, ils observaient par rapport justement, j'imagine, à la confidentialité et à certains critères qu'ils doivent respecter, comment embrasser, on va dire, ce monde virtuel où on pouvait avoir un interprète qui est dans un autre état, à venir sur on va dire, un lien Zoom ou WebEx. Donc, en ce moment-là, pendant qu'ils réfléchissaient, moi, en tant qu'interprète indépendante, j'ai perdu ma source de revenus. Pendant plus de 4 mois, il n'y avait pas d'entrée parce que, voilà, si j'ai pas d'appel, je ne suis pas payée.
Welcome, Michael. And we heard so much from Akula's story, the beginning, and how you've been the angel who made it possible, who had to see through the lens of the business and, come up with the Akula. But I know that your background, in technology, it's something that was important for Akula. So how was the landscape, the technological landscape, and what needed to be built for Akula to tackle, to address the needs of the market or the demand from the community?
That's a great question. I'm going to come back to that. So my background, well, Diane speaks 5 languages. and has had a lifetime of tutelage in business, I have had decades of experience being taught different ways of approaching technology. And I started out with a computer when I was maybe 6 or 7, and my parents made technology available to me at age appropriate things, so I developed comfort with technology very young. And I think so much of the natural ability and drawing comes from that time of just playing, of just tinkering, like what does this do? What does this do? So eventually in my high school years, I had an opportunity to spend the summer wiring computer networks at a boarding school, which I then spent the next year working at. So I learned how to wire cable networks at the age of 16, and you could wake me up in the middle of the night and I would know exactly how to do that, and wire lengths and types of cable. But I was always fascinated with programming and why do computers work the way they do, and that curiosity of why does this happen? Like, why does a computer crash? Why does everybody always say you have to reboot your computer? So when I got out of my high school years, I had taken several programming courses, and my church had a publishing firm, and they asked me, do you want to build websites? And I'm like, that sounds fun. Why not? But what ended up happening is website then got to, well, you're pretty good at computers. Do you want us to help us, manage? Like, we have this install of 50 computers. Can you help? I'm like, yeah, sure. And so you tinkering with your own home computer becomes, I wonder if I can do 50 computers the same way, not repeat these 100 steps, but make it so that I do 100 steps once and now they're available to all of that is available. So that thought of I can save time by automation has been with me since I was very young. And I worked in both a for-profit and nonprofit organization, and nonprofits have no budget. So you have to get really creative with how you proceed through things. And ultimately what that trained me to do was to do a lot of things manually that most people don't know how to do, because there's tools. There's terrific tools that cost a lot of money that nonprofit can't afford. But it also, like the way I approach things, again, can I do this once and repeat it many times? Can I reproduce effort? And in the company that I was working for before I moved over to Akula, they realized that, wait, it doesn't matter what it is. If you've exhausted your internal resources, give it to Michael, he'll figure it out. And they're like, no one's ever going to be able to do this. Michael's never going to be, and I would. And certain other things would baffle me, but in complex, weird situations where you need the answers. But really what it is it's that sense of how can I reproduce this effort many times simply? And documentation was a big thing. And so when we were starting Akula, I was working for that company and she was talking to me about some things. And I said, so the only thing that's stopping you from starting a company is paperwork and technology. I said, okay. So I had about 12, 15 questions. And I said, okay, we've been talking about this for a long time. In my world, let's go down a logic tree. I was like, in my world, when you say this, it means this or this. And they're two completely different things. So what do you think of that? And she immediately had an answer. And so I was like, okay, that was very fast. Let's see if we can go. And so I went down all 15 of these things. And it was really like she had an answer for every single one. So I said, okay, you know how you want your company to run. You know what it needs. You just don't have the technological experience to make that happen. I was like, all of that stuff is easy. I got you. So we proceeded with getting the LLC and the names checked out so that you're not running into name copyright violations. And then you look at, okay, what do we need the company to be able to do? Because at this point, the company is her. And what does she need so that she can work remote? Because up till that point, she really was focused on in-person assignments. So that meant like noise canceling headsets. That meant battery backup. That means an alternate internet feed, if her primary goes down, it means the internet itself has a battery backup, it has voltage correction, it has there's just basic stuff that you want to make sure that she stays online all the time. So now we get away from a low-end computer and we say, no, we're going to spend a good amount of money and get something that is really robust and allows her to work in a small space, because at that point she didn't have a lot of room. So it was everything had to be perfect and simple. So we really chose technologies that required very little technical experience from her end. It needed to just be simple so that if she was not ready to her computer, she could see the screen. Or is this the best application for email? Or, well, you already use Gmail, why don't we use Gmail for your company too? And try to use technologies that she's already used to and then go from there. So
Yeah, great. And we can see a good match here. Someone who is in love with human connection through the languages, a language lover, and on the other side, a technology lover, right? That's how we call it. The love of computer, the love of to wire, to connect things, to simplify the way of working, and also to save time. And then you made this Akula possible, because now it's no longer that we have limitation. You make it limitless. Yes. So I want to move now to another aspect. I believe is one of the hot topic in the world, machine learning and AI.
Oof, okay.
What is the impact on your current system right now? What is the importance or the role of the machine learning and the AI since it's decided to impose himself?
Well, I've had a lot of discussions about this with people in the industry.
I can imagine.
So language access is broken down into two parts.
Mhm.
You have translation, which is written. So I have birth certificate, I've come to America, and now I need this to be recognized. But in order for this to be recognized, it has to be translated, and there has to be a notary seal saying this is an official, accepted, legitimate translation of this document. That is not, how many words are in a birth certificate?
Yeah.
75. It's a great, you figure what? If someone does that by hand, that's an hour-ish. But what if it's 3 minutes with AI and you're proofreading a whole thing called AI-assisted translation? So you're not relying on AI to do the work. It's doing kind of like an initial very high accuracy, 85% there, and then you take it and you read it as a human and you make the choices to improve that the rest of the way. Birth certificates are a bad example, because where AI-assisted translation becomes necessary is when you're doing industrial things that would never have been translated. There just aren't enough people on this planet to translate the volume. So you're now saying if the option is AI translation versus not being translated, then it becomes efficacious to say, okay, why don't we come up with ways to have something? And so there is, and I won't use names, but there are corporations in the industry that have to deal with such a large volume, and they need it to be available in other languages. And so what they've done is they developed technologies to say, okay, we know that there is a high probability that this is a terrible translation. When we run this through AI, it outputs this, and we can track the output and say, this is terrible. And so now this needs review. So without getting too much detail, this is the sort of discussion that people in the translation space are having of what can we do to improve computer-based translation using AI. AI is kind of getting overused because there's different types of machine learning, AI. They are not the same thing. They're not interchangeable because there's machine learning and AI, and sometimes they're intermeshed so that you have these types of things in translation, but they're not. AI, if we think ChatGPT is great, but you have to give it a really excellent prompt.
Yes.
Machine translation is a lot simpler. I'm looking for these words, I translate it like this, and it does that very quickly. So it's fast, but it's not very smart.
Yeah.
So using them together is a thing. So moving away from the translation space into interpretation, then there are, like Duolingo, for example. They have developed AI that is able to tell you that you're not speaking the French syllable in the correct way. You have to have an versus an R, a L versus a they. And how does it know that? Well, I'm not convinced it's right all the time, but that's a really great illustration of it's being developed. It's especially, you're seeing AI being used for language learning. And I think that it's probably going to be great for things like French, Spanish, you know where I'm going with this, Portuguese, Italian, German, and we may see it Russian, but Chinese is absolutely getting a huge amount of money because of China. But outside of those languages, there's just no money. So you have to figure that something like ChatGPT is trained with, I've heard something staggering, like 80% English.
Oh.
So the numbers don't matter. But if the input is overwhelmingly one language and you're asking the AI to speak a different language, it will make stuff up. And this is a known quality of AI where if it doesn't have an answer, it's going to make stuff up. And because of that, it's dangerous to have that in the midst of medical. Like, what happens if it says the opposite because it's making stuff up? And so if I go into a certain popular chat-based AI and I say, how do I say this in this language? It's actually programmed to say, I don't have enough of a data set for this language. This is what I have available. It's supposed to tell me that, except that it doesn't always. And this artifacting, this false mirage of answers that it can give you based off of what it doesn't know. There was a country in Central Africa, and I dug and dug and dug, and I did not find a national flower for that language. In European countries, you have a national flower, you have a bird, you have a flag. There's just things that you expect as a Western person that aren't really that necessary, but it's a thing. So I was just curious. Now, I asked several different AIs, and they all gave me a different answer. They all knew the answer, the national flower. But then I said, okay, tell me where you got that source. And so then each one of them looked at their source and realized it doesn't actually say that.
Okay.
It says, oh, I appear to be incorrect. And so at that point, you start to say, gee, if it can't even get the national flower right, do I really want it in my medical business? Do I want to be in an open heart situation and need to be brain surgery? Brain surgery, the patient has to be awake. They've got the space open here and they're poking things and they're just making sure they didn't snip anything vital, which means you have to talk to them. Hopefully you don't have something poked and suddenly start speaking Chinese. I mean, like, whatever. But at this point, AI can be a tool, but it's not an immediate replacement to an interpreter because we're still making so much mistakes that, to me, it's a liability. Like, for example, if Tesla develops their self-driving cars and their self-driving car is like, how does it make the moral judgment between getting in an accident or swerving to the side? But if swerving to the side means you might encounter a pedestrian and a baby, a driver is going to make that call. Do I just take it? But there are sensors that may not pick up the fact that that woman was behind a tree or a mailbox and it just sees space.
Mm-hmm.
So AI isn't able to make these types of decisions yet. And who's liable if someone pokes something in your brain and you are using AI translation, interpretation? Who can be sued? The doctors can say, well, I was using the AI translation. The AI translation people are saying, we're not liable because you signed the release that says we're not liable if this doesn't work. So when does it become okay to use this? Well, maybe in situations where, like the high volume situation in translation, that if it was never going to be interpreted, like maybe we're just trying to get, hey, do you even speak any of these languages? Like I'm at our border and someone shows up and no one has any idea what language this is. Can we figure out what they're speaking? Like, can we even figure out how to get an interpreter? Like maybe they say the one word of English they know. So could AI be really effective right now in identifying languages? Yes, and there are people doing it. But there are several languages that sound so close to each other that how do you know which one it is? And some are so close that the only way that to know it is if you are from there and can say, oh, so there's not enough data. There's lots of English data, but there's not enough non-English data right now for anybody to be doing anything responsible outside of English.
And then the liability of AI into the translation or linguistic field.
So I think sometimes it's having those quick 10-minute conversations. How's it going? What do we need to be doing? Like, I heard about this problem. Is that a technology problem or is that a person problem? I've found over the years that one of the easiest ways to not have to spend money on technology is good documentation.
Okay.
So if, for example, we say, all right, you're expected to be available for your assignment 30 minutes before you log in, that gives you time to test your equipment and let us know if there's a problem. But if we don't follow up and we don't make that happen and there's a problem, then essentially that's a breach of protocol of us, but also the interpreter. And so it's sometimes technology problems are really a procedure problem. Someone didn't follow procedure. Maybe it's both of us, but it's more like, okay, that just means our personnel need to do this. Internal personnel need to do this. Our language agents need to do this. And then we need to follow up, which means in interpreting, there's only a few things that happen. But the communication is so important. And that's so you can't double book someone for, I don't know, let's say there's exams and there's an exam in room 201 from 8 a.m. to 12. And the same interpreter is going to be used from 12 until 5 in room 2005. It's like you physically can't be in two places at the same time. So sometimes it's just making sure that you're not forgetting the human element, like that piece. So again, non-technological, I'm making things up. These things don't happen. I'm just saying these are easy non-technical problems that are easy to fix as long as you're paying attention, not being overwhelmed by however many average assignments that we have, because overwhelm just means there's a problem you have to fix. So you need another person, you need better AI, and that's workflow issues are a great way to use AI because it helps. It catches problems, but where the balance is between technological and procedural things, I think is where not every problem is a nail and not every solution is a hammer. So I think that the answer isn't always to make a change, a huge global change. Sometimes it's little things like these emails need to go out an hour ahead of time. This tool needs to be configured like this. I remember one note that we got was this person needs to be using this background. It's in the system. It wasn't actually in the system, but there is no option for the background that they're asking for. So I put one in, and I agree with that. Yes, those are professional standards, but sometimes and to the provider's point, yes, that's true, but they're also not accounting for maybe there was an update that removed that background. And so sometimes there are technological problems that we have to solve that weren't actually something we could control. So that's, again, where you make sure that you're trying to choose vendors that are conservative in the changes they make that face the public, that listen to us as users to say, hey, we have these needs. And I like vendors that say, that's not how this works. I like when someone says, you're trying to do it wrong. That's not how this tool is configured to work. But there are times where there are limitations. You can't manufacturers develop tools that the most people want. So new features are because 3,000 people asked for this. if 26 people ask for a feature that is going to be really neat, but only 26 out of 20,000 people asked for it, then it's not going to go first. So sometimes you have to find these keel solutions for things that are kind of edge technology. And I avoid those pretty much whenever possible. I really try to go with the box solution, even if it's not as convenient. It's a couple extra steps. But again, documentation versus a technical problem. If I can say, click here, click here, click here, everybody's fine. But if it's kind of like, okay, here's this new technology, bye, then the human problem. I actually haven't communicated properly. And it's just really fascinating to me working for a communication company, how communication gets used so many different ways. Like we're paid to deliver communication. But if I improperly communicate, and sometimes you have Tower of Babel moments where you communicate what you feel like is very clearly, but that elicited a response from the other party that was completely outside of how I would have responded to that. And you realize I also have to accommodate the chance that not everybody looks at the problem the same way I do.
Yeah.
And so some of that is realizing your own biases, which is I'm assuming that people are going to get to the fork in the road and always go left. And they don't have the technological experience to do that, so they go right. So it's, in my experience in help desk, it's really important to get people to tell you what they see. And help desk basically is the first line of like, you get those people on the phone that are like walking you through over the phone how to fix your issue. They can't see what you're seeing all the time. Like a lot of us are going blind and we're just used to asking certain questions and getting certain answers. And navigating those logic trees of, okay, we need to get here from there. It's a challenge sometimes to ask the right questions, to get the right answers and respond the right way. So someone says, I'm trying to sign this document, but I can't find the button you're describing. And we realize that it's because on their phone, the video call dialogue with me in the picture is actually covering up the button they need to click. And my phone doesn't do that. My phone has it down here in the left-hand corner, but theirs is a floating thing that can be moved around. And I'm like, where am I on your screen right now? And so it's just like, there's certain things you can't control. You can't control that on somebody else's phone for Android versus iPhone or vice versa, or some new release comes out. So the chaos of how do you respond to the things you can't control.
Alors, now we're going to talk about the future. On va parler de la vision future de Akula. Alors, Maman Diane, où voyez-vous Akula dans les 5 prochaines années? Quelle communauté espérez-vous mieux servir? Et est-ce qu'il y a de l'expansion à l'horizon? So we're going to cover the question about what next for the coming 5 years of Akula. What are the community that you or you wish to serve? And also, is there any expansion in the horizon?
So thank you very much for the question. So the next 5 years, I'm seeing Akula expanding, becoming the premier interpreting agency that people remember and call whenever there is a language needs. And in terms of which community I'm targeting, all of the communities. In Akula, we don't have first class or second class client or language. Wherever there is a language gap, we are there to provide interpreters and translators. So the goal is, of course, because I'm from Albany, the capital region, to sustain the business here, to reach out to more facilities like hospitals, schools, social services, court system, to really promote our business in order to be, as I mentioned, the company that people, organization come to first, because they understand our mission, they understand, and they are also satisfied about our service. So we are willing to have more recruitment for people to find staff, full-time staff here in Albany. We operate internationally, but we want to have like a more footprint of footage.
Merci.
You're looking for what's
Merci beaucoup. So, Michael, aka Papa Mike, What technological breakthroughs could transform Akula capacity to serve even all the communities that your wife just mentioned?
Our current technological stack is very effective. I think that in some ways underutilized. The challenge in some cases is industry certifications that have to do with confidentiality are actually, they're not a barrier, but they take time to understand so that you can answer yes, and here's the document that says it. So sometimes it's red tape. So I think all of that should be resolved in the next short period of time. I'm not going to give a necessary timeline exact on that, but I think that, so the category of service that we specialize in brings its own nuances that we have to learn and accommodate to. And so sometimes it's asking the right questions, and those create tactical responses.
Mhm.
And so I think that there's a few areas that I'd love to see us really synergize well with. And so there's a few things that I feel like where, whether it be interpreter comfort with the platform, client comfort with, sometimes even it's if you can streamline the way requests come into standard formats, that helps because it removes the need to process by hand the requests, and that means we can respond faster. There's many ways to do that. You can say, here's a standard form. You can say, use this platform. You can say, use technology to sort it out and standardize. But you want to be able to answer zillions of requests quickly.
Mhm.
And so there's sooner or later you have to answer how you're going to streamline. And I think that's something that we're really getting close on, that to something that I feel like doesn't require an IT guru, because those answers will be done. But I do feel like until there's a mindset change in our culture that says language service is a form of inclusion, and inclusion is a human right, and that it's a good thing and empowering, and it's not part of some suspicious geopolitical endeavor. It's more like, I need to know that this isn't poisonous and it's okay to give it to my children. Then I think, it's sometimes people just saying, oh, well, we already have a vendor, but they're not servicing a language that the people speak. And that's why these people keep coming back, or they keep, and, when you get into culturally, you can have viewpoints that are deeply rooted in that culture that make them approach things a certain way because that's what their culture has told them to do. And you're telling them to do something that is against that. There's a really interesting illustration of this, which is there's a certain faith community that is asked, when is their baby due? And their religious beliefs, it's blasphemy essentially to say when a baby's due, because it's like you are stepping into the place of the creator. And so if I say that my baby is due in 37 weeks, even though I know that, then I'm saying out loud something, and that the action of speaking it out loud makes me violate my faith. And so what my answer to a simple question is to say, I don't know.
Thank you very much, Papa Mike. I have two last questions for you. The first one, I believe, is for Mama Diane. It's about Mama Diane, for the potential interpreter who are listening right now, pour les interprètes potentiels qui nous écoutent, particulièrement ceux qui sont des langues rares. So, okay, for those who are speaker of the rare or exotic language, comment peuvent-ils rejoindre Akula? How do they get in contact with you? And also for opportunity, maybe client all over the world. I believe during this podcast, you've been mentioning how you want Akula to be global. You are actually already global. Okay, and your footprint is Albany, but Albany has a big shoes and can put inside, include everyone how can they get in contact with Akula, and what are the different opportunity or different fields that you can cover?
So thank you very much. Again, I wanted to say that Akula has a website, and our website is akulainterpreting.com. You can definitely reach out through our website. There is a link where you can drop your information. Otherwise, I can also share our business phone number, which is, if you are in US, you dial 518-888-7051. But to go back to your question about people who are speaking what we call less diffuse languages, I'm pretty sure most of you are already used by default as, I would say, community interpreters. What I would suggest, because I'm pretty sure that you know the role that you're playing in your community, which is a very key role. And sometimes you have to take time off from your work to help people from your community because you care. What I would suggest maybe to educate yourself and research about how to become a freelancer. By the way, Akula has a sister company called Pero, Professeur Edouard Tite Alliance for Language and Learning, which is the component of the business providing interpreting clinics. So in that sister company, the profile that we're looking for is anyone who speaks and master English plus one or multiple language. And especially for those less diffuse languages, it's going to definitely impact your community to train yourself becoming a medical, legal, or community interpreter. But you want to know what are the basic in the industry so that you can better help your community, empower them, and also provide for yourself. Who knows? You can start as maybe a volunteer work and then it become a part-time job. Who knows? Maybe tomorrow you're going to set up your new company, and we always welcome any languages. We are open to anyone who want to learn about our interpreting clinics or want to learn about how to partner, because we definitely have room for everybody and there is enough business to go around.
Thank you very much. This concludes our conversation and celebration, actually pre-celebration, because the celebration is happening tomorrow in Albany, and I can't wait to see everyone to celebrate with Akula. Thank you very much for your time. As we learned today, language is more than word. They are present in social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and I believe Twitter as well. So we keep on learning, we keep on telling stories like that, because chaque histoire mérite d'être entendue dans chaque langue. We all have to speak the same language because we are one in this world. Thank you very much, and until next time. From a COVID emergency response to a global force, from 0 to 6,000 calls a year, from one immigrant's experience to a technology platform that declares, "We speak your language." This is Akula Remarkable 5-year story. At Tite Konsult Inc., we celebrate companies that don't just build businesses, they build bridges. Akula Interpreting exemplifies this perfectly, where technology meets humanity, where innovation serves inclusion. Thank you, Diane Mbombo, for your vision, for your heart. Thank you, Michael and Edmonson, for building this infrastructure that make daily miracles possible. To learn more about Akula Interpreting, visit akulainterpreting.com. Remember, language is more than words. It's dignity, it's access, it's belonging. And companies like Akula ensure that everyone, regardless of the language they speak, has a voice. This has been a Tite Konsult Inc. production. I am Diane. I know that somewhere out there, it's another remarkable story waiting to be discovered, another bridge waiting to be built, another voice waiting to be heard. If you know a story that needs telling, reach out. We are always listening at titeconsult.com. Until our next story discovering, remember, every story deserves to be heard in every language. Take care. Bye.